This class is now recording. I want to thank very much Rabbi Rosenfeld for joining us and for giving today's class all about the Jewish community of Colombia. Very, very exciting. And Rabbi, I'm going to put the spotlight on you so that everyone can see you nice and clear. There we go. And I hope your sound is working so that everyone can hear you. I think we do hear you. So welcome, welcome. And whenever you're ready, please begin.
Okay, I'm ready as soon as you are.
We are ready. Please go ahead.
Much. Rabbi Raphael, thank you so much. And Rabbi Levi, thank you so much for this great, beautiful invitation to visit Chicago this afternoon. We do have the same time. We're on the same time, not on the same time zone, but we have the same time as Chicago. Right now it's 2:34 in Bogota, Colombia. We're a little further east, but I imagine you're probably on daylight savings time. While we're not, we're probably a difference of 1 or 2 hours. Interesting, Bogota, Colombia is not that far from the equator, so we have a typical 12-hour day. Most of our days begin at around 6 and finish at around 6. In fact, Shabbos in Colombia is always more or less the same time. Sometime between 5:20 and 10 to 6 begins Shabbos. Shabbos is over sometimes between 6:30 and 10 to 7. So we have basically a 12-hour day. Very, very, very interesting country, Colombia. And I imagine you're all wondering what brought Jews to Colombia. I guess Jews got to Colombia for the same reason Jews came to Chicago. Why did Jewish people come to Chicago? Basically, the Gemara tells us that God spread us out all over the world because we have to pick up all those sparks of godliness that are here, that are there since the creation of the world. And the Jewish people have to get to every single part of the world and pick up those sparks. And how do we pick up those sparks? When we do something good in the middle of Chicago, in the middle of the winter of Chicago, or when we do something good in the middle of the desert of Colombia. It's known, yesterday was the Baal Shem Tov's yahrzeit, and the Baal Shem Tov would sometimes go out to the middle of the forest and make a bracha on a little bit of water in the middle of the forest to get those sparks that ended up being in that part of the world, to make a bracha and bring them back to godliness. And basically, that's why Jews got to Chicago, and that's why Jews got to Russia, and that's why Jews got to Spain. And that's why Hashem sent us to all parts of the world, and we're just about finishing the job. We just have a little bit more to do, and I'm sure your local rabbis have told you, how do we have the chutzpah to think that we're going to finish the job that our grandparents didn't finish yet? And basically we feel that they've done almost everything. And we are like little midgets on top, on the shoulders of giants. And these little midgets are gonna finish the little bit that's missing. And that's why we're here, and that's our job, to finish the little bit of learning Torah and doing mitzvot in every single part of the world. As far as the Jewish community in Colombia, there's 2 parts to the history of the Jewish community. First of all, quite a few Jews came to Colombia after the Spanish Inquisition. Jews came to this part of the world, running away, escaping from the Spanish Inquisition, escaping from Spain, from Portugal, And they came to South America, to Brazil, to Colombia, to different parts of South America. And those were probably the original Jews that came to this part of the world. But sadly, very few of those Jews remained Jewish. They came by themselves, they got lost, they didn't have who to marry, and they just lost their identity. In fact, one of the very famous cities in Colombia is Cartagena. Cartagena is a vacation resort in Colombia. And in fact, many American Jews come to Cartagena. This is all pre-corona, pre-COVID. Many American Jews come to Cartagena for vacation. And there's quite a few even plane loads of Jews that come from Canada to Cartagena. It's a very, very beautiful vacation resort on the ocean. And when you get to Cartagena, you can even visit the original offices of the Inquisition that were active in Cartagena looking for the Jews who were still practicing their religion. So when you visit Cartagena, they'll show you where the Inquisition was doing their job. So these were maybe the original Jews that came to this part of the world. That was probably stage one in the 1500s. Then again in the 1700s, a very big group of Jews came to Barranquilla from Curacao, Aruba. Quite a few Jews settled in Colombia then at that same time. And they became very influential. But again, those Jews didn't make it. Sadly, they lost their identity because they intermarried very, 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 or I don't know, and I'll share a story with you, a very interesting story in a few minutes about one family that I do know that made it from the 17 and 1800s till today. But basically, those Jews did not make it. In fact, there's an old Jewish cemetery in Barranquilla that has, it's an old cemetery. It's not even a Jewish cemetery. It's an old cemetery that has quite a few Jewish people buried there who came from Curacao in the 1800s and maybe the early 1900s. And they lived there, but most of them intermarried, and there's no memories of those Jews that came then. So these are the 1800s, the 1900s. When we speak about the Jewish community of Colombia today, we're talking about the Jews that came here in the 1920s, 1930s, and then quite a few that came after the war. But most of the Jewish community came in the 1920s and 30s. They settled in Barranquilla, Cali, and Bogota. And that's where our community today comes from. We are quite a small community. Today in Colombia, we don't have more than 5,000 Jews. In fact, the typical question when I meet a Colombian will be, how many Jews do we have in Colombia? And I'll answer, no, we don't have more than 100,000 because they think we're so many, but we don't even have more than 5,000 Jews. But people know about us. We've left an impression on the country. Quite a few Jewish people were very successful. The Jewish people didn't get very involved in the political part of Colombia because we're so few, so it's a little bit dangerous to get too involved in the politics. But, okay, there goes my computer. I'm sorry. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to connect with my cell phone.
We hear you loud and clear, but your picture was frozen.
Yeah, I know. So give me just 1 second, and I'm going to connect with my cell phone.
Okay.
Happens sometimes when the internet is not doing that great. Okay, do you still hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, and I just got on from my cell phone, so just in case the camera is not working well, you can see me on the through the cell phone. Is the camera working as originally, or it stopped?
Hold on. No, we don't. I don't see you. Hold on a second. Let
Okay,
me figure this out. You can keep talking, and I'll try to figure it out while you're talking.
I'm gonna keep on talking. In any case,
There we go. Now we see you.
okay, but this is from my cell phone, so it's not that good of a picture, but here I am, okay? Okay. Quite a few Jews. Today we're just about 5,000 Jews in Colombia. We have Jews in Bogota, Cali, Barranquilla, Cartagena, Medellin, and then we have Jews across the country in different parts of the country. These are the communities that we have today, small communities. But the interesting thing is that even though we're very small communities, most of the Jews belong to the community. So when we'll have a community activity, we're going to have large numbers of Jews. If we have Hanukkah in the Chabad house, we'll usually have about if we have a Hanukkah outdoor activity, we'll have a very big crowd because we're small communities, so everybody tries to belong. Also, the non-Jewish people keep on reminding us that we're Jewish.
Rabbi, I need to interrupt you for a second. I think your audio is a little bit, there's interference because you have two devices that are on the same Zoom.
Right, but I didn't connect my audio on the second one.
Okay, I think it might be better now.
Is it better now?
Well, if you mute one of your devices.
Okay, let me see.
We don't hear you at all now.
Do you hear me now?
Yes, now we hear you.
Okay, but I'm just wondering what's happening with the mute. Okay, tell me if it gets too bad, and then we'll figure it out again, okay?
So, we're getting an echo. Is your computer muted?
Okay, is it better now?
It's clear, but there's a little bit of an echo. Is your computer muted?
My computer is muted.
Okay. I don't know why there's an echo.
So maybe I should just, you know what, I'm just gonna stick to my cell phone and go out of my computer.
I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, do you hear me better now?
Yes, much better.
Okay, I'll continue with the cell phone, sorry.
Perfect, thank you.
In any case, we have Jews in all the different communities. We have shluchim in all the different communities. And we try our best to do the best that we can. In fact, since I'm speaking to a group of Jews from Chicago, I'll share a little story that I heard many, many, many years ago from my grandfather that visited Chicago as a shliach of the Rebbe in the early 1950s. I'm sure it's a story that you heard, but I'll repeat it again. In those days, Chicago was known as the icebox of America. There were many Jews in Chicago. I'm sorry if I'm saying this too loud. It was a very, very successful Jewish community, but they weren't so warm to Yiddishkeit. And at that point, it seems that the Rebbe and the late Lubavitcher Rebbe sent shluchim to visit Chicago, and he sent some elder chassidim to Chicago. When they got to Chicago, they went to visit a man who was a descendant of Lubavitcher chassidim, and it seems that he wasn't that close to Torah and mitzvot at that point. When the shluchim of Lubavitch came to visit him, he asked them, what did you come for? Did you come to collect money? Because in those days, if a person came to Chicago with a beard and payas, he probably came to raise funds. And they answered, no, we didn't come to raise funds. So what did you come for? And the rabbi says, I'm going to tell you what we came for. Once upon a time, every little city in Poland had their rabbi, had their Torah, but they couldn't afford to have a scribe, a sofer in every city. So there were scribes, traveling scribes that would travel from city to city to check the mezuzot, to check the Torah, and they would stay in the city for a day or two, fix the Torah, and continue. So these rabbis said to the person in Chicago, so the same with the Jewish people. There are Jews all over the world. And each Jew is a letter in the Torah. But sometimes one of the letters fade a little bit. So the Rebbe sent us to Chicago to fix those letters. When the Jew heard that, he was so impressed. You came to help us? When this Chassidim came back to New York and they told the Rebbe the story, the Rebbe said it was a beautiful example that they gave, but they made one mistake. A Jew is not to be compared to a written letter. A letter that's written sometimes fades. A Jew is to be compared to a letter that's engraved. A letter that's engraved will never fade. It just gets a little bit of dirt on it, and all you have to do is spray a little bit of water on it, and right away, it continues to show and to be as beautiful as can be. And that's what they said. That's why we came to Chicago to help those people that faded. Today, Chicago is already a big Chassidish, Yiddish city. And that's the job of Lubavitch, to get to every single part of the world and see how they can help the Jewish people that are there come closer to Yiddishkeit. In fact, Rabbi Kotlarski, whose job was and is, Rabbi Moshe Kotlarski from the central office in New York, when he originally came to Bogota in 1980 to install us, the first shluchim to Colombia, when he called the community people to say he wants to have a meeting with them, the first question they asked him was, "Bis gekommen Kleibing Geld? You came to raise money?" And he said, no, he came to give out money. And then quite a few people came to see him. And he said, no, he came to give out and to share and to help the community. And of course, that's the way he was able to help us get installed in Colombia. In fact, it's interesting, when we just got to Colombia in 1980, the man that initially supported us and helps us until today with a big part of our budget was Mr. Sammy Rohr. I don't know if you came across all over the world, there's the Rohr Chabad houses, the Rohr campus shluchim. And his precondition when we came to Colombia was, we're not allowed to raise money from anybody at all. He's the only one that has to support us, because he wants to show the people that Lubavitch did not come to raise money. Lubavitch came to help the community. And Baruch Hashem, since we're here, we've seen a lot of brachas. We've seen a lot of families coming closer to Yiddishkeit. Everybody one step higher. Everybody a little closer. And we keep on trying to help everybody come a little closer. It's the little bit that counts. So the person that wasn't Shomer Shabbat yet begins to be Shomer Shabbat. The person that wasn't kosher at all begins to eat a little bit of kosher. And that's how we're involved in the community, helping everybody come one step closer to Torah and mitzvot. I would say there's something very interesting that the shluchim across Colombia have accomplished. There's always those lost souls that get to Colombia, especially Israeli backpackers. And over the years, we've had so many backpackers that had no connection to religious people in Israel because of the typical problems, the polarization in Israel, where either you're religious or you're anti-religious. And these people come to Colombia. Quite a few backpackers come to Colombia. We've had a Seder in Medellin 2 years ago for over 800 backpackers that came to Colombia. In Bogota, we usually have a Seder for about 150 backpackers. And these backpackers have their first relationship with people that speak about mitzvot and Torah, visiting the Chabad houses all across Colombia. So they find their way back to the Jewish people by heading all the way out to Colombia, not only to Colombia, most of the backpackers start off in Argentina, travel north to Brazil. They hang out in Brazil during all the carnivals, and then they end up coming to Colombia. And it's really interesting the way you end up having an effect on one person, 2 people, 3 people, and their life changes. Their life changes in an unbelievable way. In fact, we had somebody that this happened to us about over 20 years ago when we put up our first Hanukkah menorah in a public square in Colombia. And a Jew, a descendant of a Jew from Chicago, walked by the Hanukkah menorah, and she takes a look at the menorah, looks at the phone number, comes and visits us at the Chabad house, and she was in tears. She said, I thought I was running away from all of this, and here it is again. It's so beautiful. She got involved. She came to Chabad. She sent her children to our kindergarten, and the rest is history. So it's so interesting to see the way in these little hick towns, in these little distant places, people find their way back to Yiddishkeit through the Chabad Shluchim and through the Jewish communities. Rabbi Rafal, would you do me a favor just to make this one drop more exciting? I sent you a little video clip of a television report of our Chabad activity on Hanukkah, so people can see a little bit of Hanukkah activity for a second. And I'll explain a little bit of this as we're going through it, even though this isn't everything about what's going on, but just for you to see something in Spanish.
So I'm sharing my screen. Can everyone see what I have on my screen now? Can you see it? I'm about to play it. Okay, good.
Los judíos comenzaron ya su fiesta mayor, que para muchos católicos marca el inicio de la Navidad, pero para ellos
the Jewish people began their Christmas festivities with Hanukkah. That's the Hanukkah in the Chabad house. The community joining us. Everybody sitting in the Chabad house, the children receiving Hanukkah geld.
Para que ellos se alegran y que ellos comparten este dinero con la gente pobre.
Estas son las tradiciones más antiguas de la religión judía que aún siguen.
And the Jewish children at the activity
ardió durante 8 días en el año.
And the public Hanukkah menorah, where we'll see that in 1 second.
Del mundo 189 años antes de la era común.
Los judíos han sido perseguidos por toda la historia.
Everybody dancing in front of the Hanukkah menorah.
Vamos a pedirle a
A
Dios,
famous politician lighting the Hanukkah menorah.
Colombia, el país que nos abrió sus puertas con tanto cariño.
Esta celebración se divide en dos partes. Primero, los fieles cantan y oran en una sinagoga y luego salen a prender el Hanukkah, un candelabro
Lighting the menorah in a public square.
a los 8 días que estuvo prendida la luz por obra y gracia de Dios.
Entonces, Hanukkah
The local rabbi joining us in the Hanukkah activity.
el valor libertad y el valor tradición y el cumplimiento de las reglas tradicionales.
Los rabinos aseguran que una de sus principales características es la preocupación por la educación y por sus niños. Además, cuenta con una gastronomía muy particular. Esta celebración no tiene un día fijo en nuestro calendario.
We have an indoor activity and an outdoor activity.
Hace variar sus fiestas de 1 a 2 semanas.
The president of the community lighting the Hanukkah menorah. And there we are back to our program. There's much more to talk about, but I'm going to share a cute little story with you that just shows, again, a connection to Chicago. So I'm going to try not to give any names, but it's an interesting story that happened to us about 15 years ago. There was a Jew that lived in Colombia over 100 years ago, a very, very, very famous Jew in the Colombian world. In fact, there was an airport in Colombia named in his honor. And he introduced Colombia to the aviation system. In fact, he was the founder of the aviation system in Colombia. One day, a woman comes into the Chabad house and she says to me, she wants to buy a pair of tefillin for her husband. So I said to her, but are you Jewish? She says, no, but my husband is. And I'd like my son to have a bar mitzvah, and I'd like my husband to have a pair of tefillin. So I said to her, but why are you so interested in Judaism? And she answered, because she also is a descendant of Jews, but she's not Jewish, but she would love her husband to educate their children as Jews. So I said, great, sounds good. Tell me, do you know how you are a descendant of Jews? To make a long story short, she brings her family tree and she ends up showing me the way she's a great, 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 great granddaughter of the founder of the Colombian aviation, who was Jewish, and she happened to be 100% Jewish. So I said to her, you're so lucky, you're Jewish too. And she couldn't believe it. She was so emotional about it. You can imagine the way her husband got those tefillin, and the children got the tefillin, and they had a bar mitzvah celebration. And her lucky mother-in-law in Chicago, who had a son who moved to Colombia, married a non-Jew, and ended up finding out that she's Jewish. And not only that she was Jewish, but she was so excited to be Jewish and to help him being Jewish. So here's one more example of finding those little sparks of Yiddishkeit all over the world. And I'm sure each one of you can do it in your office, in your home, on your block. And don't slow down, keep on doing it. You know, I don't know how much time we have, but if you have some questions that you'd like me to clarify, please ask the questions and then I'll try to answer your questions. And it might be a little bit more exciting for you.
Great. Okay. So yeah, usually we have a lot of questions. For those who are on the computer, you can go ahead and unmute yourself to ask a question. If you're on the phone, you can press star and then 6 which will unmute you, and then you can ask a question. I have a lot of questions myself, Rabbi. You covered a lot of ground. You mentioned, I think you mentioned that you have a kindergarten. Do you have any, is there anything there for older children to go to school? Or
Okay, we have a kindergarten for children from 18 months until 5.5 years old. And then there's a local Jewish school, which is a school that everybody feels comfortable in. They don't teach too much Judaism, but they teach the minimum of Judaism. They celebrate the holidays, they speak about Yiddishkeit, they teach Hebrew, and we teach religion a few hours a week. I teach Yiddishkeit, Judaism there too. So does my wife, so do the other shluchim. So we're all part of everything. And that's the local Hebrew school that has about 300 Jewish kids, starting from probably the equivalent of kindergarten in the States until they graduate high school. Once the children graduate high school, I would say 30% of the Colombian university students go to the States. You'll find quite a few of them in Boston. 30% probably go to Israel. And then another 30% will stay in Colombia and go to the local universities because they can't afford to go to the universities in the States. As far as intermarriage rates, because we're a small community, thank God the intermarriage is very low, but still too many. We probably have an intermarriage rate of about 10%, wow, which for a small community is a lot, but yet for the United States, it sounds great. But this is the sad reality. And as the Colombian community receives the Jewish people happier, it becomes a little tougher because our children become assimilated to the community. So these are the typical problems that all Jewish communities go through.
very interesting. So it sounds like a lot of the young people are leaving. Does that mean the population is decreasing as time goes on?
Okay. When we got here in the early 1980s, the Jewish in Bogota, we probably had close to 6,000 Jews. And now we have close to 3,000 Jews. In the 80s, many Jews left Colombia because of the crime rate, and there were a lot of kidnappings in Colombia. People were kidnapped not because they were Jewish. There was kidnapping by the guerrilla because they would kidnap the people and then ask for a ransom to make money. So many Jews left then. And as time went on, it became a custom to leave. Then they came back. And then in the past 15 years, many Jews left once again. It became much easier to become a citizen in the United States of America. So many Jews left. Also, most Bogota comfortable families have apartments in Miami. So their children would go to Miami after they finished university, and they would live with the money that was sent to them from Colombia. But this was the situation until about 4 or 5 years ago, and then it became a little tougher to become an American citizen. Also, it became a little tougher to support oneself with the savings that people had in the States. So today, some of the younger people are coming back once again. We hope more and more come back, but we don't have enough coming back yet.
And let's say relative to the other countries, you mentioned Argentina and Brazil. How does Colombia sit in terms of desirability to live there? Are people moving from there to Colombia, or to be the other way around, or
okay.
neither?
Argentinians are not moving to Colombia. Americans are not moving to Colombia. Basically, the only people that move to Colombia are those that have businesses in Colombia or a family in Colombia. Otherwise, no Americans are moving to Colombia. If Americans move, they're moving to Costa Rica, they're moving to parts of Mexico. Colombia is still a country that people feel even though it's not that terrible, but people feel is not safe enough. We've gone through in the past few weeks some terrible leftist demonstrations. So people are still a little nervous about Colombia. People are not moving to Colombia as of now, but you're all welcome from Chicago.
What are the government relations like with the Jewish community and with Israel, and what's the feeling like with the government?
Colombia is the country that has the best relations with Israel in this part of the world. Colombia is also the Colombian government is the most pro-United States government in this part of South America, which is a reality, and of course, which has many of the local socialist people fighting it. So there's the constant struggle, basically the constant struggle that these countries have between the extremes, the very rich people and the very poor people, and people always feeling that the rich people should be sharing more with them. The Jewish community goes out of their way to share with the local community. We have different programs. In fact, the Jewish community even has a school that they established to help young Colombians study, and thousands of young Colombians have gone through their school. Then there's different campaigns that the Jewish community does to help poor people, but there's still much to be desired. There's a lot of poor people, and because of these extremes, these countries are a little shaky. I mean, you've seen what happened to Venezuela. Venezuela was the most beautiful Jewish community in this neighborhood, and today we're down to such a small amount of Jews in Venezuela because of the problems. Colombia, thank God, is much better, but we're still going through tough times at this moment.
Okay, let's have some questions. Let's have some questions from the audience. Any of the seniors have any questions today?
I didn't see any seniors.
Any questions from any of the seniors today?
Where are you from originally?
A question to me? Okay. I'm originally from New York. I was born and bred in New York. I'm sure I still have my New York accent. My parents were both born in New York too. When we got married, we had the merit to visit with the Lubavitcher, to visit with the Rebbe to receive his blessing. And we told the Rebbe then that we're ready to go and to be shluchim to any part of the world that the Rebbe sends us. And at that point, the Rebbe told us to stay in New York for the first year. And then afterwards, we'll see. And towards the end of the year, the Rebbe's secretary called us into his office and asked us if we're ready to go to Colombia. And of course, we said yes. He sent me to visit Colombia, and then the Rebbe told us to go. And we've been there since then, since 1980, Baruch Hashem. When people ask me, how is Colombia? It turned out much better than we ever dreamt. A beautiful community, the people received us beautifully. They're very thankful to the Rebbe for having sent us. And we're very much part of the community. In other words, there's no community versus Lubavitch activities. We do everything together. We work together with everybody because we're such a small community. And most of the local rabbis we're all part of one group. In fact, the rabbi that you saw in the video is a rabbi that was very, very, very close with the Rebbe many years ago. He would visit the Rebbe, etc. So here we are. Any other questions?
Is kosher food accessible to you easily?
Kosher food, it's interesting, but the OU and the OK have quite a few products that they that they send from Colombia to the United States. So we don't have everything. We can get kosher meat. Of course, we have our local butcher store and our local shchita. We can even get Chalav Yisrael. We have local Chalav Yisrael that we've worked on. In fact, this year for Shavuot, we had the first local Chalav Yisrael ice cream. And we don't have enough kosher restaurants. Maybe there's one kosher restaurant because there are not going out of their way to look for a restaurant. Most people have help in their house. And that's not their first necessity to have a restaurant. Also, we don't have enough Jewish people for it to be worth opening up a kosher restaurant. So we've had a little restaurant here and there, a little pizza store here and there, but we're definitely missing kosher restaurants. The communities do produce kosher food, and one can order kosher food from the communities. I guess you don't see enough of me to realize that I'm not undernourished. Any other questions?
Where did you learn Spanish?
Interesting, a very interesting question. I came to Colombia without a word of Spanish. In fact, that was our biggest mazel, because when we came to Colombia, we didn't speak Spanish. So we got to work in the American school, which had quite a few Jewish children studying at the American school. And we opened up a little afternoon school at the American school, which that helped us make our way into the community. In fact, until today, a good part of our closest students are students that graduated from the American school. At the same time, we taught in the Hebrew school. And whether we liked it or not, we were forced to begin to speak Spanish. But it took me at least 2 or 3 years to speak Spanish for a very simple reason. A typical Colombian Jew would rather practice his English on me than let me practice my Spanish on him. But Baruch Hashem, by today, we're speaking Spanish. In fact, my children were all born in Colombia, and of course, they speak Spanish much better than I do. Two of my children are living in Colombia. One child came back as a shliach to Bogota, Colombia, and one of my daughters is a shliach in Cali, Colombia, married to the shliach of Cali, Rabbi Yehuda Slanim. I don't know if you ever had Mrs. Rivka Slanim, Rebbitzin Slanim from Binghamton speaking in Chicago. Her son is the shliach in Cali, who's married to my daughter, who speaks Spanish.
Very, very interesting. Very interesting. You mentioned before about kidnappings and things that they weren't directed at Jews. Have there been any anti-Semitic incidents in Colombia?
There are, but they're sporadic. There's the local Colombians have nothing against Jews. In fact, the local Colombians have a special, they care for the Jews. Many Colombians feel that they're descendants of their original Spanish Jews. In fact, hundreds of Colombians have become Spanish citizens and Portuguese citizens now, because Spain and Portugal offered Spanish and Portuguese passports to people who can prove that they're descendants of Spanish or Portuguese people. And the way these Colombians found their way to Spain and Portugal was claiming that their great-great-great-great-grandparents 200 years ago were descendants of the Moranos that came to Colombia. Also, there's a very interesting phenomenon in Colombia. Many Colombians want to become Jewish. I mean, we're talking about the Bogota community has about 3,000, around 3,000 Jews. But besides this, there's a community, they're called the emerging communities, and there's hundreds of Colombian families that tried to convert or converted with rabbis that came from the States, living off their desire to convert. And these people founded their own little emerging communities. In fact, we call them Los Comunidades Emergentes, with hundreds of Colombians that feel that they're Jewish. These are also Colombians that were a little disenchanted with the Catholic Church, and they decided to look for their roots. And at first they came closer to the Messianics, and then they decided, why look for something else? And they're trying to become Jewish. Quite a few of them even try to do Aliyah. And it's interesting, the Israeli Aliyah Shlichim are very happy to find them because it picks up the number of people that they can send to Israel. So there's quite a few Colombians that feel very close to the Jews. At the same time, in the leftist movements, there is an infiltration of the different leftist movements across the world. In fact, many years ago, there was a bomb put close to our shul. And supposedly it was the leftist movement of Colombia trying to identify with the PLO then in the 80s to show them that they're also doing something for them. But basically, the Colombians don't have a hatred to the Jews. They don't even have the European hatred to Jews. They're they respect the Jew. When I walk into a Colombian group, they'll respect me so much for being part of a chosen people and for being Jewish. You know, when I just got to Colombia, they told me that there's only 5,000 Jews in my city. And I started walking through the streets, and wherever I went, I would see Miriam, Elimelech. I saw so many Jewish names. And I said to myself, no, maybe they're really Jewish. And everybody walking around with the Magen David, everybody had the Star of David. And afterwards, I found out that quite a few of the Colombians use their biblical names. They believe in the Bible. And quite a few of the Colombians love using biblical names. In fact, I met a Jew here when I just got here, whose name was Elimelech. And the first thing he did when he came to Colombia was he changed his name to Miguel. And then one day he goes out in the street and he sees a big sign, Mr. Elimelech, so-and-so is doing so-and-so. And he realized that the Colombians have no problem using biblical names. And until today, the Colombians are very proud of their biblical names. So they respect the Bible, and they respect, to a certain extent, they respect the Jewish people. The Jewish community has a very good relationship with the Catholic Church. In fact, the local rabbi has activities that he does with them. I don't get too involved in that. And that's our story. Also, the Catholic Church is having a very, very tough time with the evangelicos. So they unite with us, whatever, that's another story. We'll have to leave it for another Zoom. The most important thing is you, Chicago community, you don't have to go to Colombia to be shluchim. Each one of you in your house, in your surrounding, has a neighbor that knows a little less than you. And as soon as you know a little more, especially if you're connected to such great leaders, Rabbi Rafal and Rabbi Levi, and I'm sure you're connected to so many more rabbis, remember, go out and find another Jew that you can bring closer to Yiddishkeit. Our original sponsor in Colombia, Mr. Rohr, once said, they asked him, why did you look for Chabad? Why didn't you find other rabbis to support? And he said that he made a simple, it was just a question of numbers. He said to himself, if I bring down a Lubavitch rabbi, he's gonna bring one person closer to Yiddishkeit, and that person will bring another two, and that person will bring another four. So he's gonna get much more for his dollar. because it multiplies itself as more and more and more people come closer to Yiddishkeit. So each one of you that's in today's Zoom, if you go out of today's Zoom and you find one of your neighbors and you bring him closer, wow, you have accomplished so much. So you don't have to go to Colombia to do it. You can do it in Chicago, in your building, up the block, down the block. May Hashem bless you, that you keep on growing in Torah and mitzvot, that you keep on being happy about your relationship to the Torah and to the mitzvot. The Rebbe would always wish us on Shavuot that we should receive the Torah with happiness, and it should become a real part of us, besimcha u bepnimius. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity today. I look forward, if any of you come here for vacation, just give me a ring. The rabbi will share my WhatsApp with you, and we'd love to host you for a Shabbos. As soon as Corona is over, we're still going.
Rabbi, we lost your audio. Oh, you're back on.
Bogota, we're through very tough times. Many people haven't been vaccinated yet. In fact, quite a few people have still passed away in these days. So people are a little worried about having Americans visit our communities. But otherwise, we're a very happy, welcoming community. So come visit, enjoy yourself. And besides, if you come here with an American dollar, you can get a hotel for very cheap. You can get a nice tour for very cheap. And you'll have a great time visiting all the Jewish communities. And we look forward to meeting you, Gesundheit. And may we all be together very speedily with Mashiach Tzidkenu, speedily in our days in Yerushalayim. Amen. Thank you very much. Rabbi, you can unmute.
Yasher koyach. Big amen to all of your brachos. Thank you so, so much. On behalf of everyone, wish you a continued hatzlacha, lots of success and lots of blessings. And definitely looking forward to seeing you, if not in Colombia, then definitely in Yerushalayim sooner rather than later. Thank you again, and God should give good health to everybody, and we'll see you next time.
All the best. Thanks a lot.
Take care. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.